This is historian Steve Uchifusa. I'm here in front of what is left of Colonnade Row, a development built in the 1830s. And it was the centerpiece of the fashionable Bond Street district of New York. This was the Park Avenue of New York in the pre-Civil War era, if you want to think of it this way, this whole district. And these homes were built in the very fashionable Greek Revival style. And this series of homes, there are now only four left. There were once, I believe, around 12 of them. These townhouses quickly attracted some of the city's richest and most prominent citizens. Among them were the author Washington Irving, the real estate magnate and immigrant John Jacob Astor, and also among them was Warren Delano II, the clipper ship magnate and China trader, and the grandfather of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And this area, Bond Street, was considered the northern suburbs of Manhattan before the Civil War. And one thing to keep in mind is that before the Civil War, the longest amount of commuting time that was considered acceptable was either the time required by walking, or if you had the money to take a private coach, maybe an omnibus. Those started coming in the 1830s. Horse-drawn omnibuses, which were not on tracks. They just had to fight their way through the streets and were not much better than walking or taking a private carriage. They were just cheaper than the latter. But these homes, for around 20 or 30 years or so, were the epicenter of elite life in New York City. FDR's mother, Sarah Delano Roosevelt, came here in the early 20th century to walk through what was left of one of these homes, and she remembered silver hinges on the doors, solid mahogany pocket doors, and just how luxurious these homes were. But by the early 1900s, this area had become much more of a factory industrial area. You could tell by these buildings here. These are loft buildings. A lot of these were used for the garment trade that were worked in by Jewish Italian immigrants, mostly women, who churned out hundreds of thousands of garments every single day for the needle trade. And this area became much less fashionable, and a good portion of these homes were eventually torn down, and only the four so-called rump houses survived. And they're in not exactly the best condition. As you can see, the marble that was used for the columns is deteriorating, so much so that there's netting around them. But this is a rare survivor of the Bond Street neighborhood area that between, say, 1820 and 1860 was the fashionable place to live. And it also centered not just around LaGrange Terrace, and it was named after the country seat of the Marquis de Lafayette, LaGrange, but also around Washington Square, which was immortalized by the author Henry James in his novel. But it's a miracle this survives from pre-Civil War New York. And I also have a feeling that this architecture was actually, the same architecture was used as a language when the wealthy of New York City moved further uptown, especially the Upper East Side. You can see echoes of this Greek revival in clubs and in apartment buildings to sort of tie it back to the pre-Civil War past. It was a way of asserting legitimacy. But this was a house also that when Franklin's Delano Roosevelt's grandfather, Warren Delano II, was met with setbacks in the crash of 1857, he had to sell his New York City townhouse, and he managed to keep his Hudson River estate when he went back to China to rebuild his fortune in the tea and opium trade. But it was very common for these New York families to have a New York townhouse for the winter season, and then have a Hudson River estate for the summer. So this is historian Stephen Uchifusa. This is Wet Lunch on the High Seas here at Colonnade Row, or near Astor Place in New York. Thank you so much for listening.